You either use the internet for fun or you use the internet to grow. You're here to grow. Welcome to TRS Clips.
From the 1860s onwards, there's a chap called Theodor Herzl in Europe. There has been a slow increase of, they feel an increase of anti-Semitism, and there's an affair called the Dreyfus Affair, who's a French army officer who's scapegoated for a crime he did not commit. And they all see this as anti-Semitism. So a sort of Jewish, a need. They felt that anti-Semitism was over in Europe because it had already been 100 years since the emancipation of Jews, where they were not required to live in ghettos. They could find professions other than money lending, etc., etc., etc.
Let's go back slightly a little bit to Jewish history now.
History now.
So while the Ottoman Empire was ruling over the Gulf, effectively.
The Gulf.
Are there Jewish people in the Gulf? Or?
There are some in modern day Israel. There are some Jewish people. Remember, the Byzantines would not let back the Jewish diaspora. The Arabs absolutely would not let back the Jewish diaspora. The Turkic rulers of that place would not let back the Jewish diaspora, because by this time Jerusalem is holy to the Muslims as well, because it is where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven on the white horse, right, on the white-winged horse and things like that. So nobody's willing to let them back. But then, because of and by this time, parallelly in Europe, by the 1700s, mid-1700s, there's an end of anti-Semitism in Europe because it's industrializing. You need the core component of industrialization is capital. Who has the capital? The Jews, because they have money, because they were the only people who were exempt from Christian and Muslim money lending laws. And so they built up banking. And so they're funding this. And so, there is a liberalization that happens because people are no longer focused on religion. They're focused on making lives better. So there's an emancipation of Jews. And so 100 years after that, there is another spike in anti-Semitism, which then leads people like Theodor Herzl, and because it's accelerated by the Dreyfus Affair further down the line, they feel the need for Israel. They keep petitioning all the governments saying, look, we're giving you so much capital, so much finance. This is where we originally came from. Please build our home back there.
Originally came from that land up till the point where that Assyrian Empire that you spoke about went and tormented them and basically threw them all over the world.
Threw them all over, but mainly the Romans threw them all over the world in 148 AD.
So there was a phase in 148 AD around that time where these guys got blown out of that land.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. That's how some of them came to India as well.
Some of them came to India at that point of time as well. They came in two phases, in 72 AD and then in 148.
Now, from that timeline onwards...
I think it was 148, basically the Bar Kokhba rebellion, whenever that is. I'm sorry, I'm very good with sequences. I'm not good with dates, but around about that time.
So literally up to 1945, which is the end of World War II, the entire Jewish population, some of them are in modern day Israel.
In modern day Israel in small numbers.
Got it.
Okay.
But the rest of them are in Europe and all over the world?
Europe, all over the world. Lots of them are in Arab countries, in Egypt, in Yemen, lots in Baghdad. In fact, the third wave of immigration into India, the Sassoons, you have the Sassoon Library and the Sassoon Docks not far from where we are right now, where Baghdadi Jews who moved to India.
Got it.
Okay. And it's part of that family that created Vidal Sassoon, the hair products. I don't have hair, so I don't use it, but you might have used Vidal Sassoon hair products. Same family, apparently.
Okay.
So there's a Bombay connection to this as well.
Yeah. Bombay has its own Jewish.
Yeah. And there's the lovely synagogue in Kala Ghoda.
Yeah. I have an uncle of mine who stays in America. He stayed in America for a very long time. I asked him, what are Jewish people like? He's like, they're a lot like white Marwadis. That's effectively how that community is. Very religious, very old school, very family oriented, very, 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 very business oriented.
Very business oriented. And unfortunately, for me at least the East Coast Jews, very woke. Very woke. I think that's going to change after all of this. But anyway, very woke.
I'm talking about traditionally.
Traditionally, yeah.
In terms of?
They're typically like Indians. There's a reason we have the Hindu phenomenon of lots of Hindus marrying lots of Jews, because they're all mama's boys and mama's girls.
Gotcha.
Okay. The parents interfere a lot. Like, a Jewish family is completely compatible with an Indian family. Mummy keeps poking her nose into everything. Why are you dressed like that? You're going to bring shame upon the family. Did I bring you up to dress like this? You tell me, how are you appearing in a podcast in a black t-shirt and pants like this? Is this the way I brought you up? Is this your father? Your father, his father didn't look after him. He was sitting by the light on the roadside and he used to study there. And he used to go every day to his factory work. He used to work on the factory floor wearing a full 3-piece suit. And look at you, you ungrateful child. You are sitting here and doing all of this. This is what Indian mothers do. This is also the stereotype of the Jewish mother.
You implant hustle into the kid.
Basically, right? It's a very compatible community with Indians.
God.
Especially with, and I use the term Indians, not Hindus so much, and especially West Coast Indians, which is Gujus, Marwadis, all the mercantile communities.
Similar.
Totally similar, as in insane. If some Jews got a tan, they could, and wore a sari, they could easily pass off in their mannerisms as Gujus and Marwadis. And it doesn't matter, Hindu, Muslim, same this thing, right? So all those Guju, Marwadi, all the West Coast Indian stereotypes, just go and apply it out there. Of course, there's a bit of hyperbole and exaggeration with stereotyping, but it's a fun stereotype, and there is always a kind of a root. There is some truth always in a stereotype of some kind.
Yeah, 100%. So these guys retained this kind of very peculiar culture over that entire phase of being thrown out of Israel and the Gulf.
Right. And because they were always ostracized for either killing the god or lending money, they always ghettoed around and maintained that culture. They did not get absorbed. Like, say, if you turn Muslim, it doesn't matter if you're Turk or Arab or native Greco-Byzantine living in Palestine, you would then intermarry. But because they were always seen as these outsiders, unclean people who either killed our god or who lent money, that mixing didn't happen. So they always maintained that cultural identity, and they maintained contacts with every other Jewish community around.
In other countries?
In other countries.
Okay.
Always.
Okay.
Always.
And they got rich?
Yes, because they were the only people who were allowed to do banking.
Okay.
A good Christian and a good Muslim do not do banking.
So they funded the entire Industrial Revolution in Europe?
Correct.
Okay. And now we're at World War I?
And now we're at World War I.
Okay.
Okay. And now they have accumulated a significant amount of power without being pogromed every time. Because, you can't be borrowing capital for industrialization and then killing off your lender, because then nobody's going to lend money to you anymore, because what happened to the guy before will happen to you. You can't do that. The crucial element of industrialization is a stable regulatory and security environment. And realizing that it wasn't out of the goodness of their hearts that they stopped pogroming and killing Jews and emancipated the Jews. It was a business necessity. They did the Jews no favors. Okay, it wasn't that they suddenly loved the Jews or anything like that. There used to be vicious anti-Semitism, Jew-phobia, whatever you want to call it. It was just not translated into pogroms and things like that. But a set of anti-Semitic events, and ultimately leading up to the Dreyfus affair in France, convinced them that anti-Semitism was real and we need to go back to our original homeland. Now, World War I ends, Ottoman Empire is defeated, Ottoman Levant, which includes modern-day Israel, is partitioned. And the same San Remo conference that for the first time reestablishes a state called Palestine, or rather a mandate called Palestine, also accepts something called the Balfour Declaration, which is the right of the Jews to return to their homeland. So here's the problem. When you call Israel a colonial project, sure, except it was the same colonial project that created Palestine that also accepted the right of the Jews to return. Either both are illegal or both are legal. You can't just pick and choose what you want, right? Now, in line with that, from the 20s to the 30s, there is significant Jewish immigration from Europe to Palestine. Okay, to mandatory, we call it mandatory Palestine because it was given as a mandate to the British. It causes trouble out there because the Jews are bringing in capital and they're turning the desert green. They're getting into farming, they're setting up jobs, they're setting up factories, they're setting up things. So when the Peel report comes out in the 30s, it shows that Jewish immigration is leading to an economic boom in the region, but because it threatens all the old feudal power structures who don't want, because the moment a guy has a job to go to, he isn't going to come fight for you. He isn't going to pay his taxes to you. Because what are you providing? The state provides everything for you because it's a modern state. You're paying taxes to the British, you're not getting money. This guy is providing you with jobs, so you're not even doing salam to him anymore. And you're basically treating him like, who the hell are you, man? Like you're just a big, your poop doesn't smell of roses. Both our poops smell the same. Who the hell are you? This is what industrialization does. It's a great equalizer, right? It leads to a lot of social tension, a lot of rioting, and a lot of both-way rioting. Everybody's killing everybody else kind of thing. But what finally happens is, and this state continues for 20 years, between 1920, the San Remo Conference, to 1939-40, when the World War reaches this area. And of course, we know what Hitler did to the Jews and things like that. I'm not going to go over that because that also, the Holocaust itself has a kind of a Jordanian history to it, because it was for a long time, the Nazis were negotiating to settle. They hated Jews. They did not want Jews in Germany. They wanted Jews out of Germany and any territory they conquered. And they wanted to kick the Jews out and hopefully settle them down in Palestine. Okay.
And this is religious reasons?
Because Hitler hates Jews. They are dirty, lower human beings, etc., etc., etc. I mean, you know what Hitler thought. I think the audience generally knows what Hitler thought about.
We're just skipping the World War II section, assuming.
No, we're compressing the World War II section because it's mostly the murder of Jews in this particular case.
Okay.
So what happens is, it is the Mufti of Jerusalem who goes to Hitler, and he doesn't want, now he's alarmed. Hitler doesn't like Jews, but he wants to export them to my place. As it is, these Jews have come and they're providing jobs and industrial development and this thing, and it's completely upsetting the apple cart for me. I don't want them. You don't want them. Kill them. Right? And people don't realize this guy, the Mufti of Jerusalem, was a rock star in Nazi Germany. They loved him. He actually recruited lots of Bosnian Muslims to fight for the German army and things like that. Not just any German army, SS Waffen, crack, psychotic, sadistic, sick troops that used to go around doing a lot of really sick shit. And this is a power equation. Remember, it's not, and at this time, there is no Palestinian identity. Okay, this guy is declared the king of the Arabs. He's not even declared the king of Jordan or the king of Palestine or whatever. He fancies himself the king of the Arabs.
Give some tiny context on him.
He claims to be a descendant of the Prophet. He is the chief prayer reader or chief scholar of Jerusalem. And he declares, and he's therefore a focal point for the Muslim community out there. And the Muslim community out there still hasn't gotten down to the fact that they've been split into French Lebanon, French Syria, British Jordan, and British Palestine. Because as far as they're concerned, this was all used to be one Ottoman Empire. And it was basically in an Indian context. This was like moving between Bihar and Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Okay. In an American context, it was like going from Connecticut to Maine to maybe New York or New Jersey or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm not very good on East Coast geography, but right. So it was kind of like that. Or in Britain, it was traveling between different counties. But suddenly, if India were to break up, suddenly you go from going from Bihar state to Madhya Pradesh state to Maharashtra state. It suddenly becomes, you're going from the People's Democratic Republic of Bihar to the Kingdom of Madhya Pradesh to the Empire of Maharashtra, all of which require passport controls and break down trade and all of that. Okay. Now, will the identity form so quickly? Of course not. So remember, the Palestinian identity mentally and physically is created sometime after the physical legal creation of a Jewish identity, a Jewish promise. It is created simultaneously. The physical entity is created simultaneously with the promise of Jewish migration. Okay, so either both are legal or both are illegal. Anyway, fast forward to World War II. It is in this context that this Mufti of Jerusalem becomes very popular. Now, he wants parts of San Remo. He does not want all of the San Remo agreement. He certainly does not want more Jews. He does not want his feudal power over his what he presumes is going to be his future empire broken. So he's like, yo, buddy Hitler, why don't you just kill them? Just kill two birds with one stone. Just gas them off. I mean, he didn't say gas them off, but he's like, don't send them here. You're creating problems for me. And he shows his worth by recruiting Bosniak Muslim soldiers for the Waffen-SS. So he's actually giving tangible returns to Hitler. Now, again, Germany gets defeated, Hitler gets defeated. And what do you have out here? You have a guy who literally collaborated with Hitler, who is representing the Arab cause, and now they need to clearly separate. All colonial rule comes to an end at the end of World War II, within about 10, 15 years of World War II, sometimes almost immediately after World War II. And just the same way India gets independence, this place is also earmarked for independence, in keeping with the mandates that they had drawn up in the 1920s. Now, because from the 1920s to the 1940s, Jewish migration has happened, it is the same legality. The Jewish migration is as legal as the creation of a mandatory Palestine. Okay, remember this. There is a certain Jewish coastal majority. And just like they decide to partition India and Pakistan because there is a certain majority in the east and a certain majority in the west of Muslims, and it should be partitioned, they decide on a partition of Palestine. There is a huge chunk of the south which is a desert, which is almost completely uninhabited. If you go to the Negev, you'll see it is virtually uninhabitable. It is one of the driest parts of the desert, of the larger Arabian desert. This is also given, and it is meant to be two separate states. It is meant to be Palestine, which is a Muslim majority. It is meant to be Israel, which is the local, essentially India-Pakistan. India-Pakistan repeated all over again. Okay. Except Jerusalem, which is meant to be an international mandate. So it becomes an international city. That's the UN partition plan out here. Again, the UN votes on it. So the San Remo conference, perfectly legal. I mean, you may not like it, but it is an accepted instrument of international law. And here again, you have another accepted instrument of international law, which is the UN that creates these two states. All the Arab states refuse to accept it, and they invade it the very day it is declared independent. Okay, they refuse to accept a Jewish state in any form or way. Ultimately, it's a year of fighting which the Jews win, and they establish the state of Israel. It's a moth-eaten Israel, but it more or less conforms to the UN partition plan. Pretty much. Some less, some more maybe, but more or less conforms to it. They don't want to let the state live in peace. So every day there are terror attacks. Okay, because nobody wants to recognize this new country called Israel. They constantly, and these are vicious, nasty terror attacks, killing people, and the Israelis respond in kind sometimes, going in. Mostly it's a military response, but sometimes there are massacres of Palestinian, what is now called the Palestinian identity. And this identity is literally, the identity of a Palestine is literally created overnight at this point. Like I said, there is no king of Palestine. Show me somebody who used the title king of Palestine. Qutbuddin Baiba's Bandukdari was known as a Turk. Salahuddin Ayyubi was known as a Kurd. Show me somebody from Muslim history who was known before Yasser Arafat, who was known as a Palestinian leader.
So what or who was behind this Palestinian identity? Was it the rest of the Arab world saying that, hey, you guys there, fight with the local Jews?
Yeah, but see, that doesn't make it any less. Because see, if I decide to identify as a nation is an imagined identity, right?
Yes.
So that doesn't reduce the validity of Palestine. If you believe you're a Palestinian, you are a Palestinian. In fact, the Turkish constitution, because, Turks are no longer the Central Asian Turco-Mongols with slanty eyes. Turks look like Greeks. You can't really tell the difference between a Turk and a Greek and a Bulgar and a Arab technically. The Turkish definition of who is a Turk is, do you feel Turkish? Then you're a Turk. Okay. So I imagine myself to be a Palestinian, therefore I am a Palestinian. And there's a perfectly legitimate foundational myth of the Palestinian state. Every state is created on a foundational myth. Egypt is also a foundational myth. India is also a foundational myth. Russia is a foundational myth. America is a foundational myth. Everybody is. And there is a certain criteria for being Russian, being Indian, being whatever. It varies. Some is linguistic, some is blood, some is ethnicity, some is religion. It doesn't diminish anything. So sure, there is a Palestinian identity that is now created. Point being, if you claim that Israel is a colonial construct, Israel being there is not the same as the British being here. Because Palestine is just as colonial as Israel is. So, if one is legal, the other is also legal.
New clips released at the same time that a podcast releases. This is TRS Clips. Make sure you subscribe.